Hi, Sandeep. Welcome. What's your week been like?
Yeah, it's been a good week. I think a lot of portfolio work. I think a lot more focus back on improving and getting towards profitability. A lot of good conversations. So busy week on the portfolio. Very focused there.
Our focus this week is on sustainable mobility. Cities are choked. It's becoming more and more difficult to breathe. And while electric vehicles is something everyone likes to talk about, one could argue that the pace at which EV adoption is happening in the country is perhaps not fast enough given the problems at hand. There are concerns from a regulatory standpoint, policy standpoint. More government support is needed to really propel sustainable urban mobility. There's a proposed sustainable transport mission which covers everything from roads to the railways to civil aviation, which is probably a step in the right direction. In terms of access to capital, we've seen a fair bit of investment activity in the EV space across the value chain. A couple of years ago, maybe 2019, 2020, there was much more momentum. That has cooled down a bit over the last 18, 24 months. This year has been better. Ather Energy, as we know, we spoke about it 2 episodes ago, has pulled off a successful IPO. And this week, Euler Motors got MotoCorp on board as an investor, which is a big validation for its commercial EV play. So, in that context, do you see EVs and the broader sustainable urban mobility space remaining a core pillar of BEVC investment thesis going forward?
I think EVs end up to me feeling a lot like what we saw happen in solar for a while. And I would say that, and solar or even mobile, so if you kind of draw some analogies here, there was a time at which we said that the cost of mobile data will never drop to the point where it's accessible to everybody around the country or everywhere in the world. And the prevailing thought process and approach had been, and especially if you go back to 2012, people continued to change their data plans based on who gave them lower cost data. And this was a game, and this was a belief that it was a premium product. And it took someone like Geo coming in and saying, look, we're going to change the very nature in which this is thought of, and we're going to bring it to the masses and make a massive investment and a massive investment to drive a significant difference in how that was approached and thought of. I think that today there's clearly a global move towards reducing the dependence on fossil fuels, and clearly a desire to move away from ICE-based vehicles. And so, in that thought process, we've seen how a Tesla progressed and how they brought, let's say, a sexiness to the idea of EV that didn't exist when it was the traditional auto manufacturers doing it. And now you've seen in the US, traditional auto manufacturers catch up with products that are actually equally good, if not better. And so I think that journey has taken place in that market. There's clearly a desire and a move, the same type of thing to happen here. Now, I think for it to actually work here, scale will be an important element of it. And so how do we get to that scale and how do we drive that? I'm breaking this up into two different parts. There's a question of just how do we create more sustainability in our transport solutions and in urban scenarios? And the second is EV, because the two are not the one. The EV is not the only answer to that question. And so let's just stick on EV for a second. On the EV problem, I do think that, look, it's nice that we have companies going about this, and I think it's good that people are chipping away at the problem. But I think you'll really see significant movement in it when you have scale players start to address the market opportunity. And I think that will come, and I think Hero getting involved in this, traditional manufacturers getting involved in this. Automobile manufacturing is a complicated exercise. Being able to design vehicles is a complicated exercise. Being able to ensure that they're safe is a complicated exercise. We've seen the journey that we've gone through in terms of two-wheeler EVs in this country. And I think that in and of itself showed that, look, some of these vehicles catch fire. You can't just simply bring a battery from somewhere and just and install it on the machine. There's a lot of work that has to be done. So I think it's a good thing. I do think investors will remain interested in the segment, but I also do think that it's somewhat of a big boy problem. It's not one of those situations where small amounts of capital can make a massive impact in this, and you're going to see innovation from that level. You're going to need people who've understood this industry well and who have large checks. So a GIC, a Hero, where they're committed in a different way towards making a difference in that space and are willing to ride that journey. Because a company will also take time to deliver a product that truly lives up to that lower total cost of ownership. And we're seeing it now on the commercial side, which is great, which is why Euler as a business can deliver that. But from a consumer side, I think that it's going to take some more time, and we'll benefit from global headwinds or tailwinds in that area.
Specific to venture capital, you said it's a big boy game. So, what is the role that you see early stage investors playing in the space?
I think it's tougher. Like someone like us running a concentrated portfolio, it's tough for me to see which one to take a bet on. I think that if you have a broader portfolio, I can appreciate where someone says that, listen, these guys might have a chance, those guys might have a chance, those guys might have a chance. And so if you've got a distributed set of investments across it, someone might make it. And you kind of decide to play on that idea. But I think that fundamentally, it will require larger sums of capital to figure out how to build that back-end infrastructure for manufacturing, understand how to think about distribution for these products. So I think the retail business of this and the manufacturing aspects of it are significantly capital intensive and complicated that I think it will require larger sums of capital. So the smaller guys can probably spray and pray across a variety of opportunities in it, and some of those will succeed and move ahead. And I think that this is all relevant and important for any ecosystem to develop. So I think that's great. I think disruption at a massive level happens when you'll see a bigger guy get involved and put much more capital behind the problem.
And the bigger guys are getting involved. So you have, I think, every OEM in the space now, right? And that's probably a great thing. But how do you see these sets of investors? There are the financial investors, and then there are the strategic investors. How do you see them sort of complementing each other?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to the idea that this is a solved problem. Making cars is a solved problem. Distributing cars is a solved problem. Doing it in the context of EV is a new problem. So let's leverage the understanding and the knowledge of the people who have solved the problems and bring in the new aspects of it and work together to figure out how to do that. That innovation might take place within some of those larger manufacturers, a Mahindra, a Hero, a Tata, or it may come from the outside. And if they're not seeing it within their own entities and they're willing to partner and willing to expand and perhaps get into newer segments as a result of some of their knowledge, combined with innovations and improvements on battery life, battery storage capacity, charging, there's an entire balance of systems that's required there, then I think then that's the kind of partnership that will be required. So perhaps you have the early stage venture guys place a bunch of bets, find a few that work well. Perhaps then you have some of the growth capital, move some along. Then you have some of the strategic capital come and improve upon all the systems and processes within it and facilitate the distribution relationships required for it. And then I think you have a great relationship. So, and we're seeing that across the board, right? In our portfolio, a relationship with Sheila Foam has worked really well for a business like Furlenco. Sheila Foam has understood how to deal with running a physical manufacturing business for decades. They brought that understanding, that operational discipline to Furlenco, which has enabled Furlenco to build a profitable business now. And with that profitable business, reduce their cost of capital, bring down their debt, and get even more profitable. So these relationships where strategics and venture work together are very constructive and very productive. And I think that will be, I mean, we've seen it, whether it's Yulu and Bajaj, we've seen Ola work with Hyundai. So it's happening in these segments.
The Lightbox has sort of tried to address the sustainable mobility problem a little differently. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about first what CityFlow is doing in terms of contributing to solving the urban mobility problem in a sustainable manner?
Yeah. So I think there's, again, I would go back, we said earlier, there's sort of urban sustainability, I guess there's urban mobility, and then there's EV, right? And if we start with just, let's think about urban sustainability. We have, and Bombay is a great example. We reclaimed a bunch of land for the coastal road. And if you look at the conversation today in general, the question becomes, what do you do with all that reclaimed land? And the idea that, you know, you could build a garden is one answer. Great, there's a bunch of greenery. If you build a forest, that actually provides lungs to the city. So when we think about urban sustainability, I think that thinking about these types of solutions is probably first and foremost and easiest. Then let's talk about urban mobility. There's a quote by the mayor of Bogota who said that the development of a city should be judged not by the number of people that have a car, but the number of people that take public transport. And I think that that's really valuable as a thought process to say, can you move more people with less space? And so if you can do that, the amount of space it takes on the road for people on a bicycle is this much, and a car is this much, and a bus is this much for the same number of people. So if you can put people in a bus and move them from place to place efficiently, you're actually using up less space, you're having less carbon emissions. So actually, when you talk to Jaren at CityFlow about the move towards sustainability, he'll say, look, 70% of the problem gets solved when you take people out of a car and put them on a bus. Whether that's an electric bus or not is separate. You just solved 70% of the problem by doing that. Then you take them to an electric bus, and sure, incremental gains are there. Now, from a business model perspective, CityFlow had to go through that first step of moving people from a car to a bus and get to scale. Because some of these solutions only work well when you have that scale of a user base. Then you're bringing them into a product that has that benefit to offer from a sustainability perspective, and then your economics on it work. Because for whatever it is, the cost of EV will be higher upfront. And so until you are able to drive that cost down by getting utilization up, that becomes an issue. So now that we have a user base that's doing that, CityFlow is actually now able to start migrating all of our buses to EVs. And that will be the journey from here forward. So again, I think it's like there's a statement that says blockchain is the answer. Now, what is the question? I worry that sometimes we think about EV is the answer. Now, what is the question? And if the question is really, look, we want sustainable urban mobility there, or let's start with we want sustainable urban environments, then let's start with, okay, we can solve that problem in one way, then we can layer in the next and then layer in the next. So EV plays a role, and EV will be a part of CityFlow's journey, but I think it had to be a part of the journey at the right time.
Can you talk a little bit about the Urban Glide initiative? What are they hoping to achieve with that?
Yeah, so here again, it comes back to the idea. Look, first of all, overall for CityFlow as a business, you're looking at the lack of effective transport solutions provided by the government in cities. And again, I'm not opining on whether the government's good, bad, or indifferent on this. I'm simply saying that it's a complicated situation where we don't have good public transport solutions. So in that backdrop, CityFlow's stepping in initially with a consumer-focused product, saying that we're going to offer a consumer solution, to then moving into a solution that says, look, we're going to work with businesses to do this. We're going to work with corporates to offer them the transport solutions. We're working with the government today to run their EV buses, and that's going to be a big part of what's going to hopefully change the dynamic of how urban transport works. And then we'll also have a Lux product really focused on another segment, so which is your sort of more premium customer. In all of these, we can look at how you layer in EV. And I think part of the journey for CityFlow now is that. How do I bring EV into every one of these at the right point in time? And Glide is that initiative there to say that, look, can we ensure that we're bringing the right, most efficient transport solution possible to consumers in the best product possible? And so you'll see that happen with the buses that we have starting to move towards EV buses. And that's a journey. Like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, and it shouldn't. Because look, at the end of the day, the problem I feel with climate tech oriented businesses is if you stay too focused on the impact that you're trying to create and not aware enough of the business model required to deliver that impact, you will lose out on being able to provide it at scale. And therefore, I think CityFlow has to continue to balance when is the right time to move an entire fleet over, how do you change that, and what are you doing today? That's the journey we're going to go through.
Okay. Why haven't you bought an EV yet? Or have you?
No, I haven't. I bought a hybrid. I've been very happy with it. I've had a Camry hybrid, and I continue to buy the Camry hybrid because I also feel like, again, from a cost standpoint, it's the right solution for us right now. I looked closely at a lot of the EVs, and I think at the price that they're operating at right now, it didn't feel like the right answer. I think secondhand EVs would be good, and I think that's actually a place where Droom will play a big role going forward for us as well. And I think that segment will continue to increase. There's unfortunately not a lot of inventory in that secondhand EV market yet. So I think as that happens, and secondhand EVs will be amazing because you don't have as much wear and tear. The moving parts are fewer. So therefore the opportunity to retain value or the opportunity to get a secondhand EV at a good price, I think both from a seller perspective, maybe from a buyer perspective, it won't depreciate as quickly, so you don't get as great a value. But right now it's a supply demand issue that's artificially keeping prices high. I think over time that'll come down.